Hi, everyone. We're so glad that you can join us for today's webinar on inclusive energy access in emergencies on new field resources and promising with Mercy Corps and the Women's Refugee Commission. Natalia, should we give it another? Oh. We're so glad that you can. Natalia, should we give it another minute or two to give people some more time to join the webinar, or shall we get started?
I think you should get started. We have some people tuning in from Ghana, Myanmar, and Scotland. So I think we have, and Indonesia. So we have a lot of people ready to listen, and hopefully we'll get more people to join.
Sounds perfect. Well, let's move on to the next slide then. So over the next hour and 15 minutes, we'll share an overview of the EMERGE program and its goals, finding from assessing the state of current practice, inclusive energy access resources to address current resource gaps and to enhance practice, examples of inclusive energy in practice from Mercy Corps in Afghanistan and Uganda, and opportunities for your engagement going forward. We'll then have a Q&A session. If you have any questions during the presentation, just please type them into that chat box that you'll see to your right. And we'll answer them during the Q&A session. I'm really excited to introduce today's speakers, who are Baryala Siddiqui, who is a Renewable Energy Department Manager with Mercy Corps Afghanistan, Emmanuel Azibor, Program Manager of Humanitarian Energy with Mercy Corps Ethiopia and formerly Mercy Corps Uganda, Tenzin Manil, Senior Technical Advisor of Cash and Livelihoods with the Women's Refugee Commission, and myself, Dina Yazdani, Interim Program Manager of the EMERGE program at Mercy Corps. This webinar is also supported by our online partner, TechChange. Earlier, you just heard my colleague, Natalia from TechChange's voice, who we've been working on with developing an online course on inclusive energy, which I'll talk a little more about later. And this webinar is also being streamed on the eCourse platform and, as you know, on YouTube. Next slide, please. Before we jump in, you'll recall that we asked participants to answer some questions in the registration form about the sector you work in and what countries you'll have supported implementing an energy intervention in. Of those who responded, a plurality of respondents have worked in a multi-sectoral intervention that mainstream energy, and around an equal number of participants who have either worked in a sectoral intervention or a standalone energy intervention. Similarly, we appear to have someone working in almost every sector, from agriculture to environment to markets, gender, social inclusion, energy, etc. This is great because it shows how energy can be used to accomplish a wide range of humanitarian objectives. And this also leads us to our next question. Who is responsible for inclusive energy access? Is it A, energy specialists, B, sector specialists, C, energy and sector specialists? Please type your answer into the chat box to your right. And next slide, please, Natalia. So as everyone is typing their answer in the chat box, I wanted to pull up a map to show all the different countries participants have helped support or implement energy interventions. I'll also add a note that I put this together yesterday, so I think I might have missed some participants who recently registered. So you'll see that the most interventions from this group have been in West and East Africa and then also South Asia. So going back to our question on who is responsible for inclusive energy access, the answer is everyone. All actors have a role to play when facilitating inclusive energy interventions, which we'll talk more about during this webinar. Next slide, please. The Energy and Emergencies Reducing Risk of Gender-Based Violence EMERGE initiative is a 2-year program funded by the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, or BPRM, and it's implemented by Mercy Corps and the Women's Refugee Commission. The goal of the program is to improve the safety and opportunities for women and girls through improved access to energy in emergencies. This program has been rolled out in 2 phases. During the first phase, or year 1, essentially, we assessed and documented knowledge and practices around energy, gender, and GBV risk mitigation. During phase 2, we developed the handbook, tools, and trainings to guide program design and implementation of inclusive energy interventions. EMERGE considered all types of emergency contexts in our research, with specific attention to Jordan, Uganda, and Afghanistan as pilot sites. Next slide, please. So what is inclusive energy access, and what do we mean by this term, and why are we all here today? So Sustainable Development Goal 7 already includes a definition for inclusive energy, which is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. But we're failing to deliver on the for all component, especially among displaced people and especially among women and girls. Our working definition of inclusive energy access is that inclusive energy interventions understand and address the unique energy needs across sex, age, and social groups. Whereas gender and identity blind interventions deepen disparities between groups and can increase the risk by some by treating energy program participants as a homogeneous group. So therefore, inclusive access to energy supports a wide range of humanitarian objectives and can alleviate disparities between groups and reduce risk associated with energy access and use. We understand 3 ways that gender, age, and identity show up in energy use, and how energy access is conditioned by gender identity and social status. Risk and violence related to energy access are closely linked to gender, age, and identity, and that how energy access can help alleviate gender power differentials and exposure to GBV risk. We focus on women and girls as an important starting point for inclusive energy access, but recognize that other factors can be just as important, such as race, ethnicity, displacement, and economic status. We use gender and age as a starting point, but not an endpoint for considering inclusive needs. Next slide, please. We recognize that we can't operate in a vacuum. Before we dive into our global learning report findings, we want to emphasize that adopting an inclusive lens for energy access interventions is more critical than ever, considering the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on women and girls and other marginalized groups, especially in emergency settings where we see these inequities exacerbated. Some examples of this include how, as energy custodians, women and girls have layered risk of exposure to GBV and now COVID. How the lack of cleaning and cooking solutions makes women and girls more vulnerable to respiratory diseases and therefore at increased risk of worse health outcomes from contracting COVID. And how the pandemic has also limited access to electricity, which inhibits women and girls' access to information and is a barrier for humanitarians maintaining connections, assistance, and providing referrals for GBV services, which is especially critical more now than ever, considering the rise in GBV cases globally, especially during these lockdown periods. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Tenzin, who will talk more about the EEMRG program's global learning report findings. Next slide, please.
Thanks so much, Dina. So let's dive into phase 1, assessing current practice. If you could advance the slide, please. So in order to assess the current knowledge and practice gaps around energy protection and gender, we conducted a literature review and key informant interviews with global energy and GBV stakeholders. We reviewed the principles, existing guidance, and practice around humanitarian energy issues. And while there's a wealth of resources on GBV and gender, we found that the case is different when we focus on the intersections of energy, gender, and protection. It's been clear to experts for some time, the problem statement, if you will, how energy, gender, and protection are linked. But there's a critical lack of standardized guidance and tools for assessment, design, implementation, and monitoring of inclusive interventions, whether these interventions are standalone energy interventions or sectoral or multi-sectoral programming that integrates energy. So there's a lack of practical programming and guidance and tools, which has been preventing progress, and EEMRG has addressed this gap. Next slide, please. So also part of our assessing current practice phase, we consulted communities and field-based practitioners as well as market actors in Uganda and Jordan. And there are 2 case studies. In Uganda, we did assessments in Bidi Bidi and Rhino displaced persons camps. These consultations revealed critical deficits in humanitarian funding, as well as response to adequately address inclusive energy and GBV risk mitigation. Energy needs, priorities, and associated risks were different across women, men, girls, and boys. Yet all refugees experienced significant consequences related to a lack of access to energy. And this was reflected across cooking, communications, and lighting. Refugees have limited purchasing power, which is a huge obstacle to achieving inclusive energy access. They also lack information about the advantages and disadvantages of different energy products. While there's a wide range of energy products which are available despite the remote settings where these refugees are living, they can't afford these solutions. But there are briquettes and many solar products widely available. Women and girls routinely spend many hours traveling long, dangerous distances to collect firewood, and this increases their exposure to gender-based violence and also pulls girls out of school. Access and control over energy within the household is a routine source of conflict and puts women and girls at risk of domestic violence. And to cope with the lack of energy access, refugee families are routinely exchanging their food rations for fuel to meet their energy needs and to reduce the frequency that women and girls have to make these long treks to collect firewood. So impromptu energy markets are being set up side by side with food distributions, which points to the potential of market-based interventions to improve access to energy, which as of yet have been unrealized. And our consultations with humanitarian practitioners in Uganda revealed that most practitioners were unsure about where to look for capacity building resources and programming tools, and unclear about best practices. Nearly all struggled to implement systemic and scalable inclusive energy responses. In Jordan, we met with refugees, market actors, and practitioners as well, in Azraq camp and in Mafraq. And in this context, while there is broad access to electricity, cooking gas, petrol, and diesel in local markets, affordability is also a constraint. The cost of utilities is often a source of debt and conflict with landlords, which in turn exposes many female-headed households to risks of sexual exploitation and abuse by landlords, and it's a barrier for girls to be able to study. Electricity outages and unlit public spaces are big issues for girls who feel unsafe and are unable to visit local markets and do their chores. Girls' lack of access to energy is exacerbating their already limited mobility in this context. And women's livelihood opportunities are also constrained by the lack of access to energy. Women could be engaging in home-based businesses, but without energy, this potential is unrealized. Control over information, communications, including television and phones, is drawn along gendered lines, with men and boys controlling women and girls' access. And consultations with humanitarian practitioners in Jordan also revealed that they lack familiarity with guidance and tools, and that this is a key gap for doing better for affected communities. Next slide, please. So now let's dive into phase 2, which we're wrapping up now, development and dissemination of resources to help all humanitarian practitioners across sectors proactively leverage energy access to enhance the inclusivity, safety, and effectiveness of programs, and to support practitioners who are responsible for designing and implementing energy access interventions as well. Next slide, please. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to the handbook. The handbook is available in English and will be translated into Arabic in the coming month or so. The handbook and the toolkit will help you to understand how energy access is conditioned by and can alleviate intersecting social and gender inequalities, to mitigate exposure to GBV and strengthen communities' protective capacities, so their own protective mechanisms, and to design programming that addresses the unique needs of diverse women, men, boys, and girls, with a focus on marginalized populations. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the handbook structure. The handbook addresses the following: inclusive energy for humanitarians, core concepts and facts. So this section addresses why inclusive energy matters for humanitarian outcomes and helps practitioners become familiar with basic energy, gender, GBV concepts and terminology. To accomplish what? It's a menu of inclusive energy programming options. So this section illustrates how humanitarian energy programming and action can be supportive of displaced populations, and it also demonstrates how energy programs can support a variety of inclusive and sectoral objectives. For whom? Inclusive energy assessments. This section equips humanitarian practitioners to carry out inclusive energy assessments, laying out the principles, examples, and tools. And last, how, when, and through what solution, design, and implementation. This section walks practitioners through key elements of program design and implementation, including theories of change, targeting, partnerships, and monitoring. Next slide. So I want to walk you through briefly the toolkit structure and the different assessment and monitoring and evaluation tools that are now at your disposal to address those gaps in practical programming tools. So the assessment section has several tools. The first, and they're all hyperlinked there for you to explore, the adult focus group discussion tool uses participative ranking methodology to help you understand the following: energy-related tasks and energy-related GBV risks across 3 spheres. So this helps you to look at the private sphere, the household level, income generation and livelihoods, or the productive sphere, and then also the public sphere, looking at public places and access. Also, energy-specific community-based protection strategies and how greater access to energy can support gender transformation. This tool uses an icon library, which includes images for different energy sources and tasks, which you see there in the photos on the left. And these can be used during participatory ranking exercises, and the icons, as well as all of these tools, can be adapted for context and are modular to bridge gaps in existing assessment approaches and tools. The adolescent tool supports assessment of adolescents' energy access, control, needs, associated risks, and protection strategies. There is a menu of activities that, again, can be mixed and matched to bridge gaps. The activities include focus on capturing the energy routines of girls and boys. The circle of energy helps you to understand energy access and control within the household, and helps you to map and understand how energy relates to adolescent safety, can be a barrier to their safety and also an enabler to their safety. There's a series of key informant interview tools for consultation with community leaders and market actors. And there's also a survey question bank, which provides sample questions that can be incorporated into surveys. So these questions address priority energy needs and uses, access, control, and safety barriers affecting energy use, and demand barriers affecting energy access and use, such as cost and financial barriers. Finally, but very importantly, the essential actions guidance provides best practices for ethically consulting crisis-affected populations using age, gender, and diversity lenses to ensure that when we're saying we're going to take forward inclusive energy, what we take forward is truly inclusive. Next slide, please. So the other tools that are available are the monitoring and evaluation tools. If you could go back just a little bit with the slides. There should be one more on M&E. So there are several tools. The indicator menu and indicator plan template offers an illustrative list of indicators that can be incorporated into indicator plans for inclusive energy programming. And there's a template which you can adapt. The baseline endline tool is an example from Mercy Corps' inclusive energy programming in Afghanistan, which Barlai will speak about momentarily, and can be adapted for context. This baseline endline tool includes 3 components. The first ranks energy priorities and measures the most significant change as a result of an energy intervention. The second maps energy activities and time use by gender and age to understand time burdens and hopefully positive changes as a result of the intervention. The third focuses on income levels and income sources linked to energy access and decision-making about expenditure. So I'll turn it over to Dina to talk about the training resources. Thanks.
Thanks, Tenzin. And let's just give it 1 minute. We're trying to locate some slides that seem to have gone missing.
Dina, sorry, I think it's after, I mean, it's missed out, so it's down the,
Sorry about that. Can everyone see the new slides?
Yes. Can you go to the next one, please? So this was the, yeah, perfect. So as part of the phase 2, in addition to the handbook and the toolkit, we also have training resources that we've put together. The in-person and the online training curriculum accompany the handbook and follow its logic. Trainings are designed to support all humanitarian practitioners to mainstream inclusive energy within their work, and for energy specialists who are responsible for designing and implementing standalone energy interventions. The trainings were designed to take place over 2 days, with the first day covering an introduction to inclusive energy access, laying the groundwork and inclusive energy assessments, and inclusive energy program planning and design, while the second day covers inclusive energy program design and delivery model development and implementing, monitoring, and coordinating inclusive energy access. The training agenda and activities are designed for a global audience and are intended to be used by a wide audience of practitioners and organizations. While the package is designed for a 2-day workshop, they may be adapted for delivery over a longer period of time or via shorter sessions that build upon one another. A customization of training materials for specific agency, geographic, and programming needs is encouraged, with some suggestions provided on how materials can be adapted. These were originally designed to be in-person trainings on inclusive energy in the countries where we've been piloting inclusive energy access resources, so in Uganda, Jordan, and Afghanistan, and were initially set to take place in spring and early summer of this year, but as you know, have been postponed due to COVID, and we're currently looking into ways to adapt the trainings to either be moved online or delivered remotely. So please stay tuned for more updates on that front. As part of this COVID pivoting, our Mercy Corps team in Jordan is currently taking some of the workshop sessions and applying them with their engineering team in-house and remotely with our WASH team in Iraq to see how the guidance and tools can be adapted across sectors, especially sectors like WASH, where we see a lot of crossover with inclusive energy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're also developing a 4-week e-learning course with tech change, as I mentioned earlier, using the EEMRG curriculum and translating it into an online format. The course includes live facilitation and events with opportunities to learn and engage with other students. Similar to the design workshops and handbook, the e-course covers basic energy, gender, and intersectionality concepts, identifying energy models, needs, sources, and delivery modalities, steps for implementing inclusive energy assessments, design and implementation, and case studies throughout the course. It also includes opportunities to apply module concepts via interactive activities and assignments. We're currently wrapping up our pilot test and we'll be launching the first full course in September. The course will demand around 3 to 5 hours of learning per week per student, so for a total of 12 to 20 hours of total expected student learning. And then currently we're working on the costs for the course, but whatever costs we do determine, we are planning on offering scholarships as well. So now that we've covered our report findings and training materials, guidance and tools around energy, NGBV, and emergencies for practitioners across sectors, I'm excited to hand it over to my colleagues, Baryalai and Emmanuel, to talk about how inclusive energy actually looks like in practice and some of the work they've been doing in Afghanistan and Uganda. So, Baryalai?
Hello, everyone, and this is Baryalai. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for giving me the time, the opportunity to share my experience of the image program in Afghanistan. And thank you the team for developing the online session and giving us a chance to share our experience with the globe, with everyone. Next slide, please. So generally now I'll just give a briefing about Afghanistan, about the energy work of sorry about that. So I'll just give a briefing about Afghanistan energy work. So as per the international and national, Afghanistan is one of the top country that they are still in a need of power in the and there are almost 19 million people that they still don't have. So can everyone hear me well? Sorry about the inconvenience.
Your volume is good. You're breaking up just a little, Barley.
Is it okay now?
Why don't you continue?
Okay. So looking to the scenario to the Afghanistan is still a country which is still moving forward with the international aids, and looking to the present scenario, still there are many projects and many programs have been implemented in Afghanistan, and the projects, they are short-lived projects. So we have planned under image program and other programming, renewable energy programming, we have planned to change the scenario of short-lived programming to look for the sustainability of the program. So next slide, please. Okay. Presently, Emergency Corps Afghanistan has been working in 3 different energy work. The first is Afghanistan. Those that can afford upfront cost at a single transaction. What does that mean? It means that we are supporting some of the vocational training programs, and the beneficiaries who have been graduated from some of the skills in some of business which need a power. So Emergency Corps Renewable Energy, where the renewable energy is working alongside with the unification training program to provide a solar system for the businesses, for small businesses, and there all those beneficiaries are covered under this scenario. This first scenario that sum of contribution is carried out by the person, or who can see the contribution is carried to start their business. And we have a second that's build, operate, lease, transfer the ownership. So Emergency Corps does carry all the design work, all the implementation work, and also financing under this program. So the contract is made with the customer to be signed as a lease contract for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. So whatever the payment is made for the system, that is paid back within a time period. So they just do a monthly payment. Once the payment is over, all the payment is made to Mercosur about the system, the solar PV system. Then the ownership is transferred to the beneficiary, to the person who might be a household, who might be a business, or there might be a small business or a larger business. So that depends on the request of the customer. So, and we have the last scenario, the third category, the third program, which is EEMRG program we have implemented. That's those that can afford the upfront cost, or which does not come under to above category. So we just looked at a social programming, in non-economic development programming. We used to support especially women and girl in this part, and those women who have a skill and who are planning to start a business and who are the only source of income. Next slide, please. Within this, we have under EEMRG program, we have covered 2 provinces in Afghanistan, Kandahar as well as Herat provinces. Afghanistan is a country which has still a lot of traditional sensitivity, and implementing similar program. That's quite tricky job, but still we were able to implement this program in coordination with Renewable Energy Department of Mercosur, and also with Youth Vacation Training Program of Mercosur. So within the EEMRG program, 3 different programs are to make this happen and to bring about the objective of this program. So within this program, what we did and what we were able to do was that in Afghanistan, women they're not allowed. Women, girls, they are not allowed to just speak out publicly and or just share their experience, their issues. So what we were able to do is that we developed a friendly environment for different participants to share their concerns, share their issue, and we also got information from importance of energy, and see the relationship or the energy, found the relationship of energy with the social issues. And we just got more information about within this program. Within this program we got more information about the internal family violences and mistreatment of girls and women due to receiving high electricity bill. Before this program was, at the first stage, this was implemented as a focus group. We had different focus group survey. Within that focus group, we have managed to find more information about what's happening in the locality, and also misbehavior of shop owners with those who they were renting shops, and also using of bad electricity. There we got information of that, and in overall we increased the awareness among the community, thinking about how to change, how to bring a change in their society. Through a different scenario, and also we just were able to do prioritization of need of energy within the focus group. Then we got more information that's what's needed in the society. Next slide, please. Implementing similar programs, such program in Afghanistan, it's quite challenging, and we had also faced different challenges. That's the first, we can say, lack of trust among communities. The problem is that sharing the experience, sharing the issues, or family issues, or locality issues, or community issues. It's not. There is no trust between different communities, because when we are developing focus group, so different community, they're just coming together to share their experience. In the second, stigmatization and confidentiality, this is the major factor. when developing a focus group which consists of different women and girls, different locality people, so they are not able to openly talk about their issue because they are afraid of the people who are sitting around her, and she is worried that she might be exposed to some of the issues, family issues and problems, and they cannot trust more about to talk their main issue in their problem, in fear of being exposed. So the other thing the woman and girl they're afraid in Afghanistan is that, yeah, they're worried, and most of the time when we were when we were making a focus group, they were asking, if I talk, if I share my experience, can it be publicized, or do other people will know about my name or something? And they are afraid that they should not. They should not be in such kind of cases. And the other is traditional issues. Women is not allowed to talk at all because male is always the decision maker, not a woman. And that are like the fifth, hopelessness. So most of the time when we were talking with them, we had focus group. Most of the women and girls, they were complaining, yes, we had appeared for many such kind of programs, but we didn't hear anything back from the organization that they are working in this sector, and we have not received any kind of support from them that they can be able to solve our issues or problem. The other is the sixth one, skilled woman without work due to lack of access to energy. I mean, Mercy Corps is one of the international organization which is working in development of skill for women. I mean, we have different youth vocational training programs that the women they can learn about beautician parlor, they can learn about tailoring, they can learn different branches in tailoring work. Once they just graduate from the course, they are not able to work because they don't have access to energy. From other side, they have to take care of the family. They have to take care of the house. These were the challenges we were facing on. Next slide, please. Once we completed the focus group in these two provinces, in Kandahar as well as in Herat, so we came to the conclusion to just do some kind of piloting work for women households to see that what is the impact and how we can how much the change we are able to make within this program. So the pilot phase we have planned to install 18 solar PV system, small solar PV system for households for women. So the idea behind this pilot phase in the objective in the impact of this was that the monthly income should be increased. And if a monthly income is increased, then there is a greater chance of a woman to take some of decision at the house, and and it is possible that if that happens, if the income is increased and she is helping hand to hand with him, so she will be able to speak out at some point. Second, support those female who are only source of income. In Afghanistan, we have been still facing through, passing through a very tough situation that when looking to the scenario, most of the girl and women, they are the only source of income. They're supporting their children and they have lost their loved one in war or any other tragedy. So they are just supporting their family. And the third, awareness increases in the society. So the idea behind using solar PV system is that to increase the awareness in the society and to see that the people, in the woman, in any other, they can think about using renewable energy or any other source of energy or technology that they can bring a change at their house. And that's why working in the other is to in Afghanistan, women, they are not allowed to work outside. So what we did, we just installed solar system in the house so she can do her business from a house. So that's to avoid, I mean, not to bring any change in the traditional or some kind of problem to the traditional issues in Afghanistan. And the other is the pilot piece. It will help us to invite other organization and donor to support the idea behind to decrease the strength of violence in the society. Uh, Next slide, please. Once we install the solar PV system, and at the same time we developed some different the criteria that she should be. I mean, some of the during the focus group, we got some of the information that some of the women, they talk openly about their issues, their gender issues, and also their violences at the house. So that, I mean, they have talked openly about why they're dealing with. So we just took that one as a criteria, and the other is the woman should be skilled, and she should be responsible for her income generation. I mean, how she should be, and so we did it in solar PV system, and we are in the phase of monitoring, and we have developed a monitoring tool. So we are on the ground and we are working on to the monitoring and learning tool is finalized, and the team is on the ground. So we are hoping that we're gonna have we will have 3 different information about this tool. The one is the monitoring. It is technical part of that. I mean, the engineering team will be with this team to see that whether the system is still working, it's sustainable, how is the efficiency. And the other is impact and learning. You will see that what is the change, how much is the change in their income, and how is their I mean, the change in behavior. I will just give, when I mean, we were doing like last 2-3 days back, we had a I mean, I was there. I will just give you a very small story. It was really I mean, it was really something I couldn't believe that it would happen. When we were planning to install solar system, we had technical assessment. And when we were doing technical assessment, there was a girl, her father and brother, they were not allowing us to just get into the house. And when we did assessment and when we installed a solar system, after 3 months, 4 months, we are going back to that house. When we see her father and same father and father, they just brother, they come and they request us to please just come to the house. And then I ask, what has changed? What is happening with you guys? I mean, I still remember that scenario, but then they were just, I mean, they were smiling and they just told me that we were under COVID-19 situation. Even I was not able to work. My son was not able to work. She was the only one who was able to support us, and she was doing tailoring work at the house, and we supported all the children. We supported Eid holidays. We supported all Eid expenses, because she is working and she has more time to deal with I mean, to do tailoring, and so that was something different. Next slide, please. The other thing which we just were able to do under Image program, I mean, we did this the pilot phase, and I mean, Mirza Corps Afghanistan, they were able to convince some of the internet funding in Mirza Corps Afghanistan, I mean Mirza Corps HQ, that they were able to that we were able to develop a concept note, and our concept note was accepted by internal funding. That's now the name is changed quietly. That's Women Economic Empowerment Program that will be implemented in Helmand. So it is the start of the Emerge program. I mean, with the Emerge program, we were able to convince some of internal funding that they allow some of the budget to increase the frequency of this work to other province. To, I mean, now we will be working in Helmand, which is also which has similar sensitivity and incidents as it is in Kandahar. So concept note is approved, and we are working, and now we are able to. So we made quite changes, but the idea is same, objective is same, but learning from the Emerge program, we just made quite changes. Now instead of focus group survey, we'll be doing focus group survey, as well as we'll be doing individual survey to know more about. I mean, we'll learn in this that even we're not on those ideas and those issues which we were not able to learn in focus group. And then we'll see we'll analyze within this W3. We'll analyze the importance of focus group and also the importance of individual group, that which is better. So these are some of changes we have made, and we'll be doing the same solar PV system installation. We'll be doing the same procedure, but this time we have just included in individual survey, so that will help us to get more information about the society. Next slide, please. The objective of WA3, or Women Economic and Equality Program, is improve reliable, affordable, and clean energy to electricity for household, with females who are already contributing to their household economy. And the second objective we have is improve understanding around women's ability to leverage, improve energy access for economic empowerment and well-being. So this is the planning that we have, and we'll see that how much we are moving forward. I think that is from my side. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Baila, for that fantastic presentation. My name is Emmanuel Azebo. I'm the humanitarian energy manager at the Mexico office in Ethiopia. I saw the implementation of this Emerge related portfolio programs in Uganda, and I'm happy to bring you an experiences from Uganda and how we're able to use key elements of our learnings and insights from the Emerge study. Next slide, please. So Uganda as a country hosts more than 1.4 million refugees, and most of whom are from South Sudan. In the West Nile, specifically Bidi, where this program was implemented, there are over 230,000 refugees in this settlement, with an average of 50-50 male to female ratio. In terms of energy access, Uganda as a country, refugees have only about 89% access to energy, and have more than 89% of refugees do not have access to modern energy. In West Nile, a UNHS study proves that only about 38% of people in the West Nile region use paraffin, 39% use dry cells, and only about 17% using solar, which is a modern form of energy. In Bidi, in terms of household incomes, we are looking at around up to about 74 cents per day. And if you look at this and what is required for to buy or to acquire energy products, it's quite woefully inadequate. We also realized from the various assessments that insufficient access to sustainable energy is a major protection risk, especially for refugees and host communities. So if you look at the attendance issues of smoke inhalation, malnutrition, and particularly exposure to sexual and gender-based violence while collecting firewood from the bush. We also realize that refugee households on average use about 22% of their income for energy, for both lighting and clean cooking. And then women and children were spending in between 12 to 24 hours a week on firewood collection. So this is quite an issue, especially energy access and how this interlinks with sexual and gender-based violence. Next slide, please. In terms of our inclusive energy practice in Uganda, we have 3 main programs, and our main strategy is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for most vulnerable populations in both emergency and development contexts. In Uganda, we have 3 programs. The EEMRG program, which was the precursor to the others, which provided the research grounding and the knowledge for the other 2. Then we have the strengthening access of refugees to renewable energy and the access to modern energy in humanitarian settings pilot. So the aim of the second 2 programs, which was built from the research from the first EEMRG program, was to increase access to affordable and quality energy products and services in the BDBD settlements by critically supporting the private sector to resolve some of the key market constraints to entry. So our goal was to support them to branch out their services into the settlement and establish their presence and provide these services, as opposed to direct delivery of what you call, quote unquote, free distribution of this energy product and services. From the EEMRG program, we use key tools that, such as the key informant guides, to have an understanding of what is the current demand and supply constraints for the private sector not being able to access and provide services in these markets. And some of the key constraints that were identified are the product appropriateness and availability. So we are looking at, in terms of value proposition, what do consumers want? Do these products meet their needs? We are looking at lower consumer awareness. Most consumers do not have an idea of, do not know what a quality product is, even though you can find any other product on the market, most of which are of inferior quality. Then the demand perception, especially from the private sector, the amount available, the income levels are very low, and as such, whatever is available as disposable income to spend on energy services is quite low. And this is one thing that the private sector always asks. If you speak to them, they always come up with this particular market segment will not be able to afford the products that we are selling. And the key market leakages and the last mile distribution infrastructure. So for the private sector to move from, let's say, their business as usual locations into these rugged and difficult markets, it's quite challenging, especially setting up last mile distribution, human resource, agency network, warehousing facilities. This becomes one of the key challenges, and that initial cost of doing that mostly prevents them from entering this market. Appropriate finance in terms of consumer financing products are mostly non-existent. Quality assurance and trust. All the customer knows that this product that I'm buying of quality, and based on their previous experience with other inferior products. So these were key constraints that we're seeking to resolve by working with the private sector to co-create solutions to address these constraints, to allow them to provide services in these markets, which will go a long way to tackle issues related to the sexual and gender-based violence in this settlement. Next, please. So what are our key takeaways while we're implementing this? What are we very mindful about from our learnings from the EEMRG study? So we realized, especially when we work with the private sector, Data is very important. Data is one key issue. So in terms of data, we have to design this intervention with the privacy around the pains and priorities and value propositions that emerged from the study. So some of the key priorities of households, they need lighting for basic household tasks, for cooking, communication, and phone charging. So these were key priorities that we had to take into consideration when we're designing this intervention with the private sector. So data is very, very important, and that data and all of this became very clear from that study. Co-creation, it's very important that the private sector knows is very good at something, is very good at mostly selling in very purely market-driven market or settings. But with a partnership with humanitarian actors who have so much knowledge and experience in the humanitarian market, we're able to co-create a solution based on our joint experiences and knowledge. So this is very important. We co-created solutions with 2 private sector partners around pay-as-you-go pricing and the smart entry subsidies to just catalyze the market and the last mile distribution infrastructure. We used available spaces and partnerships in the settlements. For example, we had an innovation center, 2 innovation centers that has now become the customer service and the distribution point of these 2 private sector partners. Most pay-as-you-go contracts go for around a minimum for around 24 months, but due to the peculiar flight risk that the private sector partners were very worried about, we're able to really design a first stage 12 months contract using at least smart result-based subsidies, at least to encourage the private sector to cover their initial cost and also being able to reduce the length of this pay-as-you-go contract. Adaptation of women-to-women approach. We realize that in BDBD, close to half or a larger proportion of the population are women. Most of the households are women-led. So it's very important to find an approach that resonates with women, especially if we are targeting specifically women to own a lot of these products. And this women-to-women approach has worked in clean cooking sector, and the solar systems have also used this. So we adapted this. We recruited a lot of the sales agents were female, and so we deployed. The private sector deployed these agents into the communities, and also a lot of the groups that were women-led were targeted, like savings and loan groups or women-led were targeted. So in the picture next to in that slide, you can see one of the agents who is female selling, conducting activation campaigns. Affordability versus free distribution. So this is where the whole issue comes in. Most of these communities are used to direct delivery, free distribution of these products. So trying to ask them to pay something for some of these, it becomes one issue that we have to deal with, especially when it comes to the bigger systems, the pay-as-you-go systems. So we've been able to use a smart result-based subsidies, at least to drive down the upfront cost for these pay-as-you-go systems, was able to provide some cushion for households, especially vulnerable households, to acquire these products. Education and awareness creation on quality products is very important. How do we teach consumers what a quality product is? And there are a few metrics or practices that the private sector solar energy companies use. For example, the drop-down test to really show consumers that this is a quality product as opposed to maybe what they've been used to, the inferior ones in the market. Next, please. So from these two pilots, we have managed to work with D-Light and Village Power to introduce their services in BDBD. They have established their base in the settlement. They have a service center. They have technicians and after sales agents have access to the call center from which they service the client base in BDBD settlement. These programs are 1 year period. Over this period, more than 3,900 solar products have been distributed, which benefited over 2,000 households. In terms of the purchase mix, based on our intentional targeting of women groups and women households, close to 55% of these products were bought by women. In terms of the pay-as-you-go contract, which are longer-term contracts, males bought a lot more, 63%, as opposed to 37% are women. But our greatest joy is that at least these two companies have found this market very lucrative, and now they're able to sell a lot of these smaller lanterns on their own. We know this market requires further deepening in terms of trying to offer a longer-term pay-as-you-go contracts as opposed to just the 12 months that they are doing now. With the market deepening, that if they are able to offer 36 months, then the smart subsidies will no longer be required, because with a longer period, you are able to cover a lot of the cost. Next, please. So our key lessons from this particular pilot, it's a lot of the time, it's very important to co-create these solutions with the private sector as opposed to a top-down, push-down of solutions, or the way a lot of humanitarian actors see things to be. And they need to be intentional about targeting women, girls, and children in this program. Sometimes if you leave the private sector alone, the private sector will go for who can afford, irrespective of whether it's male or female. So it is very important to be intentional, to deploy intentional strategies at targeting vulnerable households or communities. And the target productive use opportunities. In our pilot, we have deployed a number of productive use opportunities for women to use for either the dressmaking, lighting at the shop, and all of that. That's also very important, because with that, with the productive use opportunities, there's income generation attached to it, and it becomes very easy for the loans to be paid over time. I put here convincing other partners to implement, like to look at market-based approaches as opposed to direct deliveries. And this is very important. And this will be possible if we are able to prove or to show other partners data from our activities. And this is what we've been doing through a number of networks in Uganda, especially the Energy and Environment Working Group, showing our data from this pilot that these households at least can pay something for their energy services. And at least if you pay something for their energy service, you work with the private sector, they stay and provide the services required for the product, as opposed to just procurement-based activities, which you just give without the private sector being there to provide the necessary after-sales support. Data is very important. Understanding the issues and the context before designing these projects or solutions is very important to understand what are the key priorities. And this we're able to get a lot of insights from the EEMRG data tools and the assessments that was undertaken to design these issues. Adaptiveness is very important. With the private sector, the quick turnaround of activities, adaptation in the market, when things change, when lessons come, that's very important, especially in this. But we also realize as humanitarian actors, most of our systems are not too quick to adapt. Adaptation, especially in the field. And this is one key area that we should become better at, especially when we work with the private sector. I think that's all from our side from Uganda. And thank you for participating in this webinar.
Thanks so much, Bayali and Emmanuel. So opportunities for your engagement. We're always looking for opportunities to engage with other organizations and also for collaborative opportunities. In terms of opportunities for engagement with some of the resources that we talked about today, for the e-course, please reach out if you're interested in learning more or interested in registering for the upcoming fall launch. As I mentioned earlier, we'll, or at least I captured in the slide earlier, we'll be offering an e-course essentially every season for the next year. For the design workshop, please email us or reach out if you or your colleagues are working in these settings and would like to stay connected to register for these trainings or just to stay tuned for if they move online. Similarly, we're also happy to work with different teams and potentially organizing a training of trainers to hold these trainings in smaller settings and helping adapt them to fit your team's needs, whether that's helping consolidate the training into a one-day training or selecting certain components of the training that are most relevant for your team and your programs. And then most importantly, applying the guidance tools. As we finalize the handbook and toolkit for a hard launch in early fall, we're currently in a soft launch phase where we've made the tools public and available for different teams' use. We'll send an email out, as Tenzin mentioned, with links to the tools to end this presentation. We're happy to walk through the training materials with different teams in more detail. And we welcome feedback. As you apply the handbook guidance and tools, please reach out with questions and share learning and adaptation so that we can continue ensuring that the tools are relevant for practitioners across different countries. Next slide, please. And questions, your questions and comments are most welcome. You can type in your questions into the chat box, and just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning into this webinar. And Tenzin, I'll hand it over to you. It looks like we've already had a few questions throughout the presentation in both our eCourse chat box and the YouTube live chat box.
Thanks, Sina, and thanks, Barley and Emmanuel, again for your presentations and everyone for your engagement. We have had a few questions roll in, and we'll be spending about 10 more minutes or so. So please do type in additional questions that you may have. The first question is from Kevin at IIED in London. It's about resources. So this was a question shared earlier, so perhaps we've answered this in part, but the question is, will there be a testing iteration of these tools? So the toolkit, as well as the handbook and the training materials, have been piloted and are continuing to be piloted. So some of the opportunities that Dina just shared in terms of the soft launch of the training materials, we're continuing to adapt the training materials based on participants' feedback. So really welcome your engagement there. In terms of the handbook and the toolkit, the handbook was shared with an external advisory group who gave us some recommendations to ensure it is as user-friendly as possible for field level practitioners, and we've taken all those recommendations on board. So those are already reflected in the version that you have access to. In terms of the tools, we piloted those in Uganda, Jordan, and Afghanistan. So some of Barley and Emmanuel's presentations reflect findings from using those tools in those contexts. And in each case, we did a small workshop with our Mercy Corps colleagues in the field to reflect on how using the tools went, and also received feedback from communities on how those activities went. So I hope that's helpful in terms of your question around testing and iteration. And the next question, Barley, I'll throw to you. Lou from Ghana has asked about the case study you presented. Can you please clarify the criteria you used to select the beneficiaries for the program in Afghanistan? So Barley, over to you.
I don't know. I just different categories. I mean, for 3 different categories, we have 3 different criteria. So if we're going for the Emerge program, that's the contribution. So that's that is for those those women who are the only source of income and who are skilled women and who has a business. Who has a business. That's 3 criteria for the for those female who are, and also at some stages of the violence, family issues they have. Those who have talked openly about their family issues. So these 4 comes the criteria for Emerge program. And when we go to the Brishna program, Bolto model, that's 3. 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, a lease contract base. That's they should pass technical assessment to that Mercy Corps technical team should see whether they're in the range of the solar system that we are planning, whether they need 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt, 15, or until 100. That depends on programming. And also they should pass the financial due diligence. I mean, to see stability of their financial issues. I mean, their business. How is the business? This is two main criteria. If someone is starting a business, if someone is still guaranteed by 2 to 3 people that the business is stabilized, and if there is any issue, those two guarantors, they take care of any other problem with Mercy Corps. And the other comes with the third programming, that's youth vacation training program. The criteria is that a person who is applying for solar system to get, that is he should be able to pay 30%, 20 to 30% contribution as an upfront cost, and also should be graduated from one of the vocation training programs of Mercy Corps, and should have a business plan, and should have already started a business. So these are different categories we have in Afghanistan.
Thanks so much, Barley. So depending on the intervention, whether it's a standalone energy intervention or energy being integrated into a sectoral or multi-sectoral intervention, the criteria is going to be very different. Barley, thanks so much for sharing regarding those different programs in Afghanistan. The next question we have is from Megan from IOM in Cox's Bazar in the Bangladesh Rohingya response. Her question is around resources and programming adaptation. Her question is, how can we adapt programming when not explicitly planned, laid out, and designed with best practices and tools? Just dropping the question for colleagues so everyone can see that. I can kick us off and then pass the mic. So I think that what's really important is, hopefully you would leverage the guidance and tools from the beginning of your planning, assessments onwards. But it's always important to course correct, right? Often in humanitarian response, unfortunately, we find ourselves in the place where there's been an oversight and we need to course correct, and it's important that we take those opportunities, especially as we recognize the importance of inclusive approaches and mainstreaming gender-based violence across all of our programming. Even as humanitarian generalists, it's important that we pause and work collaboratively with, in this case, protection, energy, markets, gender colleagues, depending on what your own specialty is, to engage with these materials and see what those opportunities are to adapt programming going forward. I'll stop there and pass the mic. Dina, Barley, Emmanuel, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'll just mention quickly that I agree with everything that Tenzin says. I think if you're hoping to use some of the resources for current program, I think one great first step is kind of taking a step back and looking at some of our inclusive energy best practices and seeing whether did this program listen to diverse voices? Did we identify local existing capacities? Did we collect and use data ethically? And was participatory approaches used? And I think a lot of the tools can be repurposed into monitoring tools like focus group discussion tool and the adolescent group tool too, to understand whether the programming is being responsive and intentionally targeting women. And as Tenzin mentioned, seeing how we can kind of adapt, how you can adapt and pivot from there. And also to mention that a lot of the programs that we did pilot these tools in that Bariala and Emmanuel talked about, and Bariala and Emmanuel hopefully can speak more to this too, were actually ongoing programs. So maybe Emmanuel, if you can start us off with how your program used the tools and adapted from there.
So thank you very much. So as Imagine our program was an ongoing program before we had these tools. And the advantage, at least we had, was the program was not long spent in the field before we had to go into this adaptation. But the most critical factors are just adaptive mindedness of the team, especially when you're working with these private sector partners. And the co-creation process also makes it very much possible for us to adapt what has already been done, at least if the private sector comes in and the solution is already prepared, it becomes very challenging for them to work with. So even though we lost a little bit of time trying to adapt the already ongoing or existing processes based on these new learnings, in the end, we realized that it was worth it, and at least we're able to achieve a greater impact in terms of these private sector partners establishing their presence in the field. So we understand that at least some of our internal processes may not be so much conducive to adaptation, but it is the first instance have to be the team-mindedness and then be able to get everybody along with it.
Thanks so much. Barley, anything you want to add? If not, that's okay. So please continue to type in your questions into the chat, and we're nearing the end of our time, but we really want to address all your questions. So please do send them our way. Megan has a question. Let me just read this. I feel like the design part of the project cycle is the key area, but what happens late into a response?
I would say, I mean, this is something like
Go ahead, Barley, go ahead. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Barley, did you want to talk about adapting a program?
I would say like what the experience which we have in Afghanistan is, as I explained in my presentation, we have worked in 3 different departments. So all the tools and all the being done in coordination with the different programs. So we have learned and we have adopted some of the experiences from other programs like the Renewable Energy Department. They have great work experience in energy sector, and also we have adopted some of the challenges and questionnaires from the Youth Education Training Program, which has been active for more than 15 years in Afghanistan. So I mean, that's how we did and how we're doing in Afghanistan.
Thanks, Barley. Sorry, you're breaking up a bit, but we did get some good nuggets. Thank you. So Megan has a comment, a question around design considerations. Dina or Emmanuel or Barley, if you want to talk about design considerations, I know we spoke about this a bit more, but if there's anything you want to add, whether it's partnerships, looking at modalities, key pieces, over to you.
I'll jump in really quickly. So I think in terms of design approaches, the handbook that we've put together that we'll share out in the coming weeks too is very modular. A lot of the handbook covers, the different ways you can approach partnerships and the importance of partnerships. different ways to approach and very intentionally targeting. So as I mentioned earlier, using some of those focus group discussion tools, the adolescent tools, key informant interviews to understand, better understand the context and the needs, and then also ensuring that you are segmenting your targeted population as well, so that you're actually reaching out to, adolescent girls versus, women versus people with disabilities, women with disabilities, et cetera. So really touching on those intersectional pieces too, to understand those unique needs.
Yes, I want to add about the design consideration. The same as during the design period we did in Afghanistan, it was about looking to the most need of the community, and importantly, we're finding the gaps that we are able to support the business or the idea behind, to be able to bring the role of female or woman onto the ground. So the design this was the main scenario we have moved forward. When we did a focus group survey with the different teams, so we were trying to find the gap that we can fill in, so as to bring the role of female in the society.
Carla, you're cutting out a bit again. Sorry for the connection issues. We have reached the end of the questions that we've received. We'll give it a few more minutes.
And to just power their capacity. So that was, I will not go to the detail of this. Move forward with designing in all this. We have with renewable energy department.
Thanks so much, Barley. We have reached the end of the questions that we've received so far, but we're happy to take a few more minutes. If you want to ask any further questions, please do drop them into the chat. And you can see all of our emails there. So please be in touch with us if you have other questions about the resources, about the opportunities to get engaged, about Mercy Corps' ongoing inclusive energy programming in Uganda and Afghanistan and globally. Please do be in touch with us. So last call for questions, everyone. Thank you.